was really exciting to read with you guys and to be able to hear the words that I've read on the page. And I'm going to start with a poem from 6 portraits, and it's called On Our New House. And when I wrote it, our house was new, and now we've been here for almost a decade. And like many of all of you, has spent a lot of time in this house over the last couple weeks. So this poem is called On Our New House. Statistics say I won't die here, but I will have a baby here, 2 babies here, that I won't put them on a sled and lock them outside here, that I'll give them hot chocolate, too much chocolate here, that I'll fight with my husband here, stay with my husband here, we'll drink a bit too much every so often here, have sex 2.2 times a week here, we'll cook my turkeys dry. 50 years he lived here, the man who built this house. He didn't know 6 daughters in, his wife would go far before him, that he'd abandon her garden, let the stove sit cold. His eldest reluctantly laid down the keys, said, please, water the blueberry bush, promised we'd eat fruit big as a fist. And so, as Jennifer said, my new book just came out early this year, which was really exciting. I'm an incredibly slow writer, so I've been working on it forever. Excuse me. So I wanted to start with one of the poems that was on the Writer's Almanac, and it's called The Best Chocolate Chip Cookie in New York City. And it combines 2 of my favorite things, New York City and desserts. And one of my favorite things about visiting New York is always eating a lot while I'm there at all the amazing restaurants. And when they picked this poem for the Writer's Almanac, it was back in early February, before New York was the epicenter of the virus and any of this had unfolded. So I feel like sort of a little bit of a love letter to New York City. So this is called The Best Chocolate Chip Cookie in New York City. In case there's a line, I show up at 7, but the man at the counter says the cookies won't be ready until 11, and by then I'll be on the train, nearly halfway back to Providence. He and the dozen people behind me are waiting, so I quickly choose a ham croissant and a blueberry muffin, glittering like a hotel lobby chandelier. The shop's a dab of yellow on the block. It's only seats along the front window where I sit and look at bleary people stopped at the bodega across the street, touching apples and mangoes until they find the ones most untouched. With my first bite, the croissant comes undone, its shawl falling to the floor. I break off the peak of the muffin and hear the sugar overfill the valleys of my back teeth. I'm trying not to think about how it must taste, the best chocolate chip cookie in New York City. How big, how warm, how it would have collapsed in my mouth, traveled my blood, made wild pinwheels of my cells. How much time have I lost hunting perfection? Once, before cell phones, before the days when cars couldn't linger outside the airport doors, my plane was delayed on the runway for 4 hours. And my husband, before he was my husband, waited for me in his cramped Plymouth, battered from years of lake effect snow. He just waited, reading a book, turning on the car every so often to listen to the radio. When I finally arrived, he was surprised that I thought he'd be gone. He said no one asked why he was there so long or what it was he was waiting for. And this next poem is a poem that the next 2 poems actually are poems that I've never read before. This one is called Dear Sita, and I'm Arabic, and Sita is Arabic for grandmother, and Jida is Arabic for grandfather. And they both make an appearance in this poem. And so This is a letter poem to my sitta. She would not like it, as you will be able to tell when by the poem, but she was the best. Dear Sitta, I hope you're sitting on a gold throne close to Jesus and are mad as hell at me, clucking your tongue at how I've become a heathen. I hope Jida's there to take the fall, that you whisper hiss in Arabic how he undid me. Too much TV, all that candy, while he chomps his empty pipe and grins. You died fast, they said, your heart in Lucy's driveway, come to play Tuesday night cards. They buried you Christmas Eve, and Sitta, the poem they asked me to read, all about Jesus, about your first Christmas in heaven. There were tears and years and voices ringing and angels singing and pain in the heart, and we really aren't apart until the rhyme scheme burnt up at the end. If you weren't dead, you would have been proud. You would have loved the good Catholic boy I married. We gave up Jesus together, the way Jida kicks cigarettes. Our daughter carries your name, hangs your ornaments on our tree. That's how I go on, knowing we won't meet again. And this next poem is the last poem that I added to the book. It was actually after it was accepted by Silverfish Review Press. I asked if I could add a couple more poems, and this was one of them. And it's about a few years ago, my husband had he just had a random accident in the house and got a really bad concussion. And it took a lot longer to get over and was much scarier than I expected. I write for a healthcare company, so I'd written about concussions and teenage athletes, and then to really see it up close like that was a really scary thing. This is called The Concussion. All the doctor could prescribe was darkness and quiet. Blinds closed, screens off, no reading, no driving. I held his arm as he went down the stairs, walked behind while he climbed. The snow kept falling, feet on feet. Water seeped into the basement for weeks. To be near him, our daughter multiplied by booklight. Reading, I learned our brains are softer than the meat I buy at the market, can be damaged with just the touch of a thumb. He never forgot his name, but could barely sign the medical forms, the black letters blurring together, floating like the brain floats in cerebrospinal fluid, like the embryo floats in its thin amniotic sac. How do we rely on these bodies that are holding tanks for water and blood? Weeks in, I leaned out our bedroom window, chopped snow with a broom until our roof looked like a smashed sheet cake, its pieces beginning their slow, delicious slide over the gutter. Had this been any other winter, he would have waited with a shovel below. But still, he couldn't tolerate daylight, and even I had to shield my eyes from the sun's reflection, wild and thick with thorns. The doctor had said a month. It came and went. Then another. He read for 10 minutes, then 20. He started to pull up the blinds in the morning. How did I feel the day he walked our daughter the 2 blocks to the bus? Like we'd been fractured and our seams filled in with gold. And I write a lot of art poems. I'm not reading any of them today, but sometimes art kind of makes its way weirdly into even the poems that aren't really about art. I had just seen an exhibit, I think that was called Remade, at the Rhode Island School of Art and Design. It had all these beautiful dishes that had been fixed with gold, which is where the end of that poem came from. And so I just wanted to read one more poem, and this is another New York City poem. We go there fairly often to visit my sister and one of my best friends who lives there. And one of the last times we went to see Matilda. on Broadway, and we were coming back late at night, and we're taking the subway back, and the subway, my daughter and my husband got off, and then the doors closed before I could get off. And there was a whole crush of people behind me, so it was clearly some sort of weird malfunction with the door. And this is what happened after that. The subway doors closed after my husband and daughter, but before me, and she began screaming on the platform as the train lurched the length of a few cars, then stopped hard. The crowd surging forward, reaching over and in front of me, trying to force open the doors, when shouting came from the back. Someone's fallen on the tracks, a child. I was confused. My girl had been the only child on the platform. Panic came on slow as air bubbles in the water before it boils, but it must have just been milliseconds before I turned and said, "A child?" And a woman yelled, "That's her mother. Get her mother off this train. This woman needs off the train." All went still as they stared at me, and it felt like the time I flipped over my car, hitting every side, then wasn't sure if I was dead or alive, because I've been looking at my child a minute before, and they're saying she's on the tracks with the rats and the electricity and the trains charging this way. Had she run toward the car when it started to move and slid over the edge? She'd had on Mary Jane's and a polka dot dress. I pressed myself against the glass, frantic as a pinned moth, its wings still beating. I tried to see down to where she'd been as the crowd murmured like a receiving line, a few people laying their hands on my back as suddenly they appeared. My husband waving, my daughter still screaming. It was a grown woman who fell, not in, but next to the tracks. She was drunk, trying to get the doors open for the rest of us, so my husband had no idea why everyone on the train was looking at the two of them, why people started hugging and congratulating me as if she'd just been born. Thank you so much for inviting me to read and for being here today.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was really beautiful. That was an incredible reading.
Thanks.
So before I introduce Liz, our last reader, I just want to thank Margot Taft-Stever, because none of us would be here today if it weren't for Margot. She started Slapering Hol Press in 1990, and because of her vision and all of her hard work, we've had this press for a very long time, and hopefully will continue to thrive even during these difficult times. So thank you so much, Margot, for all of your hard work, for your vision, for your editorial prowess, and for helping all of these emerging poets have their work come out into the world. We really appreciate everything that you do to support this press and to make sure that we've survived for the past 30 years and will continue to survive. So this is the book that we're going to hear from now. It's Liz Marlow, They Become Stars. And as I mentioned, Liz went to AWP, so she had a mini launch there, and she got to read some of her poems. But now this is her real official launch, and we're so happy that so many people could come today to hear her work. Her poems have recently appeared in Body, Potomac Review, the Carolina Quarterly, the Greensboro Review, the Rumpus, and elsewhere. She earned her MFA from Western Michigan University. Currently, she lives in Memphis, Tennessee, with her husband and 2 children. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Margot, Peggy, Julie, and Lynn for making They Become Stars the most beautiful it could be. I'm also grateful for your continued support in making sure that They Become Stars reaches as many readers as possible during this trying time. As you might know, today marks an important day in Holocaust history, as it is the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which began on April 19th, 1943, and ended with the ghetto completely ruined on May 16th, 1943. So thank you for scheduling this reading on such a meaningful day. Most of the poems that I'm going to read today use Chaim Rumkowski's voice, or they are persona poems in the voice of a fictionalized version of one of his true young female victims. Chaim Rumkowski was the Judenrat chairman of the Łódź Poland Ghetto from its establishment in 1939 until its liquidation in August 1944. The Łódź Ghetto was the second largest ghetto established by the Nazis after the Warsaw Ghetto. It was the first ghetto established and the last liquidated due to Rumkowski collaborating so much with the Nazis and establishing 120 factories in the ghetto for Nazi supplies. Though most Judenrat chairmen of other ghettos collaborated the least amount required without being killed, or in the case of the Judenrat chairman of the Warsaw Ghetto, they sometimes committed suicide when they realized that there was no hope for their community. Rumkowski believed that by collaborating that he was saving more lives. He truly embraced the phrase Arbeit macht frei, or work sets you free. Some people believe that had the war ended a year before it did, he would be recognized as a hero for saving so many thousands of people, and all of the negative history about him would never have been made public. However, it was. Before the war, he was the director of a Jewish orphanage in Łódź and was known for sexually molesting the children despite his impotency. This was long before the Me Too movement, so many of the women who worked in the orphanage knew what was happening, but they thought that by staying there and comforting the children that they were helping. The first poem that I'm going to read takes place in that orphanage. Chaim Rumkowski on Hunger, 1938. A boy sits with his back to the wall of the orphanage, avoiding other children on the playground. His pageboy hat, a little too big, nearly covers his eyes like a wedding veil as he makes circles in the dirt with a stick. Is he trying to draw a map home? The boy's eyes, like the sun during a full solar eclipse, fill in light with shadows. If I were to reach out to him, would his skin be soft like freshly laundered shirts, or dry and cracked like the earth? In another life, he could be mine. The next two poems that I'm going to read are in the voice of a fictionalized version of a true victim of Chaim Rumkowski's. Miriam arrives at Chaim Rumkowski's orphanage, September 1939. Are all pillows made of dead mothers, hands holding children's faces? I search for her face in wood grain, shadows behind my eyelids. I play a flute to remember her voice. The man with white hair like a snowman monster hands me green gummy bears, and I see her eyes the color of tart apples. His cello voice says, "Come into this room, child." I go, because his pockets are filled with candy, pebbles, and bears. Green, apple, red, cherry, yellow, lemon, and I want them all. I feel the hole in my stomach yell candy as he pulls down my dress, ripping the sleeves like paper. I am his paper doll. My mouth, a piccolo without pressed keys, forgets how to say help. I scream non-words. He pulls down my panties with floral lace ruffles mother once sewed for me. With popsicle fingers, he touches me between my legs, tries to put splintered chapped lips on mine, but I stop screaming to clench my mouth like a book slammed shut, turn my head away like a crane looking off in the distance. I never knew that fingers could go inside other than ears, nose, mouth. Why didn't anyone tell me? I float away into mother's arms. They hold me tight with breath as she screams for me in pianissimo. In the time between that last poem and the next poem that I'm about to read, Chaim Rumkowski became the Judenrat chairman of the Łódź Ghetto. He was appointed that position on October 13th, 1939. Miriam, upon hearing that Chaim Rumkowski will visit the orphanage, October 1940. If each raindrop represents a click on a metronome, then time can stop. If this era could return to growth, a flower bulb pushing its head up out of the dirt, then voices wouldn't have to speak language to be heard. Instruments wouldn't need fingers, breath to create music. A fence without a gate is a page of music filled with rests if I get too close or don't properly measure the pace outside it. On the other side is a man with the eyes of my mother, with the voice of my father. Though he says halt, I am pulled toward him the way my fingers are pulled toward my flute, the way a bow is pulled toward a cello's strings, the way leaves are pulled toward the ground. A bang louder than a deer stepping on a branch in a quiet forest, louder than the drums fortissimo in an orchestra, hits me. This next poem is about Heinrich Himmler and Arthur Niebe. Heinrich Himmler was in charge of the final solution under Adolf Hitler. The first time that Himmler saw a dead body was in Minsk when he witnessed a mass shooting of 100 Jewish men. According to one of the witnesses, he vomited on sight when parts of a victim's brain splattered on his clothes and face. Due to his experience, he implored Niebe to create a method of killing Jews that separated the killer from the victim. Because of this conversation, Niebe invented gas fans, which were used in the Chełmno extermination camp. Gas fans used carbon monoxide poisoning. A tube from the engine of the van went into the area where the victim sat. As the van drove around town, the victims sensed euphoria before dying. This is unlike the Zyklon B poisoning that tortured the victims in Auschwitz as they died. Heinrich Himmler and Arthur Niebe discuss humane killing. Order is in all instinct, the way geese know to fly or swim, the way vultures smell out the dead. When the dying begins, order loses its way. Shots from a rifle ricochet or fragment flesh. What was once a complete person now dwells on another man's clothes, skin, rather than earth. What defines a man is how he handles those fragments on him. Does he brush them off the way he brushes dust off his knees? Or does he let empathy barrage him so much that he vomits? When Himmler felt disgust, as he had never felt anything else, while leaning toward the grave pit's edge, while watching limbs shape themselves into stars, he knew debris bursting from him was too much for his men. His men mattered most. Their ability to sleep like others in cushioned coffins, their ability to keep their eyes open without twitching, how the dead's eyelids need coins to stay closed. On September 4th, 1942, Chaim Romkowski gave a speech to the entire Łódź Ghetto, asking parents to give up their children below 10 years old to the Nazis, even though they all knew that this meant the children would die. In the next poem that I'm about to read, when Chaim Romkowski speaks, those phrases are directly taken from that speech. Chaim Romkowski leads a Jewish council meeting on the body, days before the transport of 15,700 children from the Łódź Ghetto to Chełmno extermination camp, September 1942. 3 men and 1 woman sit at a table discussing how to save the body. Romkowski says, "To save the body, we must cut off the limbs." The woman, a mother, says, "The limbs you speak of are the body. Though we wear stars, we are not starfish. When we cut off limbs, they will not grow back." The men look at her for a moment, furrowing their already creased foreheads like sulci in the brain as their thoughts advance a choice already made by men in uniforms. One tries to smooth wrinkles with his hand as though his forehead were linens on a bed. He says, "There is no body, just limbs. They took the body when they fenced us in like cattle, pigs." The woman disagrees. "We still have a body. It dies when these limbs leave us." Romkowski doesn't want to hear the woman. The body is who can live and work. The body is who will live tomorrow and the day after that, not asking for more. The woman counters, "The body is who will live days so countless that they birth more days, days more than the stars we wear on our jackets. Without the body, there is no life. Not even a constellation to fill darkness. There is no universe. There is nothing." Chaim Romkowski on not having children, September 1942. Wagons pulled by thin men, not mules, not oxen, not engines, filled with children leave, come back filled with bread. Laughter hides under floorboards, holds its breath in walls. Wind and rustling leaves sometimes echo the sound. Will that hush bury me? Romkowski's sexual predation did not end at the orphanage. Survivors of the Łódź Ghetto documented that he exchanged sexual encounters for food, particularly candy, until it was no longer available in the ghetto. Chaim Romkowski on hunger, January 1944. If you were to ask me how many candies, bread slices I have given for seeing, touching girls, I'd tell you they are countless, like breadcrumbs, like bowls of watery soup. Even Lenin did not hold such power over his people as I do with food. This next poem is a new one that is not in the chapbook, but will be published by Borderlands within the next year. Chaim Romkowski on the train ride from the Łódź Ghetto to Auschwitz, August 1944. Listen to your stomachs rumble like an empty train in the distance, slowly approaching to pass. Remember the difference between the sound of most trains, metal rolling on metal, saboteurs shuffling over piles of coins from emptied pockets. This train, thudding bodies, close your eyes and imagine headboards slamming against walls as they all fuck. And the one that carried your family, Pick out a single scream from a crowd, the way you might pick out one violin from an orchestra's tuning session. If only you could have captured a different sound, a niece praying, would a flute arouse that memory, or a nephew laughing, would a magpie mimic it? To recall, while unfolding the photo of them you once stole out of a coat left behind, now crumpled in your pocket. As the train slows, the way a sperm whale slows behind a fishing boat, ready to fill its belly with spoils, listen to church bells, calling them to mass, calling them to a wedding, calling bystanders away from us. They stand so close that they could toss unwanted bread slices through slats. And this is the last poem that I'm going to be reading. Chaim Rumkowski on memory upon arriving at Auschwitz. Thick August heat sticks in the air like a cloud around a rotisserie, cooking prime rib roast just before sundown on a Friday night in the orphanage yard. That smoke signaled blessings. The boys dug holes with their fingers, burying beetles, putting pebbles on top, marking tiny graves with hopes that they would come back from the underworld, replacing pebbles with coins. But these beetles, crawling out from a heap of ashes, never leave the underworld. This is the underworld. They schlep loads of ashes on their backs like men, women, and children during a deportation. The loads contain indecipherable messages, names they mimic by clicking. If I say my name loud enough, maybe they'll click it back to life after someone throws me on a pile. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was incredibly moving.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
We're all in his voice. And I had just, within the past 6 months of when I started writing that first poem, I had had 4 close friends or people that I knew die. And so I was in this horrible depression. And I don't think that I would have been able to write so many of the poems in the chapbook in a short amount of time had it not been for that personal experience that I was going through. I was completely obsessed with death. And there was something in my depression that that I recognized, in that when we're all in our dark place, there's still like this little tiny bit of human in us. And so I grasped onto that because I was in my own dark place. And, you know, I've met abusive people in my life, and there's something about them that draws people to them, that allows them to be abusive to other people. And so I was also pulling from those experiences of knowing those people when they were, you know, somewhat likable, and then when they turned into monsters, just knowing my own monsters in my life. So so that's how this book came about. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lynn, that was a great question. And Liz, thank you for answering that for us. Who else has a question for the poets?
I have a question to Liz. Was one of your relatives a Holocaust survivor?
Yes. Well, no, not a survivor. So, I found Chaim Rumkowski when I was trying to find things about my own family. My mother's side of the family died during the Holocaust. My great grandparents, brothers and sisters, as far as I know, they all perished. So I was researching towns where they were from, and at one point, a family member had mentioned Łódź. I later found out that my family was not really from there, but by then I had already started writing about him and was already like completely immersed in the character of him. So yes, so some of my family died, and that's mostly people from my mother's side of the family. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. And thank you, Lynn, for this beautiful cover. I love it. I'm so grateful.
I was happy to do it because I had worked with another Holocaust survivor. And so I had done a lot of research on some of the children and the people that had perished during the Holocaust. And my own family also. Some had perished and some escaped. So
I think if you don't already have my chapbook, and if you can see the cover, it's like a poem itself, because it is a photo of an orphanage, and it's overlaid with children who were sent to a concentration camp. And then that first poem of my chapbook begins in an orphanage. So thank you so much, Lynn.
yeah, I had gotten permission from the man that did the research in France of that orphanage to use the pictures. So that's how I was able to use them. It's a beautiful book. I'm glad to be a part of it a little.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question for Rebecca, for Julie? Other questions for Liz?
I have a question for Rebecca. Another question. Are you working at any of the hospitals that have the COVID virus patients now in your area?
I work at MGH, so yes, but we've been doing a lot of chaplaincy remote as well. So we have some people on site rotating. We're doing a lot of pastoral support via the phone, and the priests as well are doing sacramental support over the phone and FaceTime. It's a very, very strange thing for chaplaincy, which is a ministry of presence, you know. But yeah, we also are doing virtual staff support via Zoom too. So some people are on site, some are off, and it changes. But yeah, there's a lot of COVID patients there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, and thank you also for your photograph for my chapbook too.
You're welcome.
Very cool.
Any other questions for the poets? I was wondering, Rebecca, if you could read one more poem, because we had a technological glitch during your reading, so some of it wasn't recorded. So I was wondering if you could pick one more poem from your chapbook to read for us.
Sure. Thank you again, Jennifer, for having this gathering, and it was really, really powerful to hear Liz and Julie as well. I feel floored. I will read a poem called Utility. My friend's neighbor scrubs a wall a day, keeps the cleanest house. She says my studies are a luxury to sit around thinking all day. Don't forget about the blue-collar worker. She knows words for hay in a language I don't, what first cut and second cut mean to the horses. On her porch, after offering us everything in her fridge, she tells family stories, the same stories told over and over, same tire tracks in the snow leading to and from home. The logo for the semi-trailers Dad built, then managed, is blue. At his retirement party, his colleagues said they're sure his blood runs blue, even if cut when it should turn red. He told a story of working on a Saturday when we were kids. He put us in a dark trailer to look for light leaks, and I found one, a tiny hole where light poured through around a screw. It is a luxury to be loyal to light, not to equate a rotting barn with one's own hunger. When my grandmother jumped a fence after being chased by a bull, I imagined fear. Was this when she was showing the neighbors she could farm alone after her first husband killed himself in the barn? Or had my grandfather arrived? But when the chasing bull turned into a story, we laughed each time. One of those stories that stitches through what brings people together under the guise of fact. An uncle asks me to pray for a pain that started long before he can remember. The farm is only one beginning. Prayer is the relationship between helplessness and love. When I write, there's a catch in my throat, trying to link the right empty word to its right heart. An ancient forest before or after is another beginning. To say, take my pulse, it is blue too, a blueprint in the blue snow.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions for the poets today? Anything else that you'd like to ask them, or maybe that the poets would like to tell us? Again, we really appreciate all of you being here and sharing the launch on this important anniversary, as Liz has told us, April 19th. If there are no other questions, I want to remind everyone to let people know about the Slapering Hol Press chapbook competition. It closes on the 15th of June, and I'll type the information in the chat, that if you'd like to give people the information on the website, but it's the same place where you found the tickets today. You can send people the link so that if they have a chapbook in progress, a manuscript, they cannot have published a chapbook before, and they cannot have published a full-length collection before, if they're interested in applying. But please make sure that they read the guidelines and submit. We're really interested in reading your new work. Margot, Peggy, is there anything that either of you would like to say to our great audience today?
That was a wonderful reading. Thank you so much, all the poets. It was phenomenal to hear your voices after knowing all of you. And thank you for your work too. It was really moving reading. Thank you. And I hope that you can get your friends to submit to Slapering Hol Press.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, all the poets. This has been fabulous.